Artificer-Serf Yelos here. Been tending to Dark Angel's armor for 3 decades. Each dent tells a story they'd rather forget. Battles where they hesitated. Moments they chose secrecy over victory. Times they killed their own allies to protect their shame. I catalogue every mark, every scar. The chapter thinks I'm just another mindless serf, but I'm building a record. When the Inquisition finally comes asking questions, I'll have answers written in ceramite and blood. Chapter 1. The Sacred Duty. The warning klaxons hadn't sounded in 17 days when I descended into the Reclusium's lower chambers that morning. That meant the Blood Angels had been home, on Baal Secundus, without deployment for more than 2 standard weeks. An unusual peace that made the fortress-monastery feel almost empty, despite housing over 800 battle brothers. I was 63 years old, which made me ancient by serf standards, but still young enough to work the 16-hour shifts that maintaining the chapter's war gear demanded. My fingers had long ago developed the calluses and chemical burns that marked my profession. The skin around my nails was permanently stained brown from the sacred oils, and my lungs carried the metallic taste of ceramite dust that no amount of water could wash away. The Reclusium occupied the eastern tower of the fortress monastery, a massive structure carved from the red rock of Baal Secundus itself. Here, the chapter's chaplains maintained their vigils, and the chapter's fallen were honored. But in the lower chambers, accessible only through mag-locked doors that required gene-coded clearance, was my domain, the Armory of Penitence. I passed 3 other artificers on my way down. Jekka, who specialized in the cleaning and maintenance of Jump Pack's old Morthan, who handled weapons exclusively, and young Saraband, barely 20, who was still learning the basic rites of armor consecration. Each of us moved in silence. Speech was not forbidden in the Reclusium, but it felt like sacrilege. This was a place of contemplation and service, not idle conversation. The Armory of Penitence was so named because this was where the armor of space marines who had fallen to the Red Thirst was brought for purification. The Blood Angels' flaw, their genetic curse, manifested in moments of overwhelming bloodlust that could reduce even the noblest warrior to a ravening beast. Those who fell to it and survived were brought here, their armor stained with the blood of allies as often as enemies, bearing damage that told stories the chapter preferred to keep quiet. But most of my work involved standard maintenance, battle damage, the accumulated wear of centuries of war. Each suit of power armor was a relic, some dating back 7,000 or 8,000 years, passed from marine to marine as warriors fell and were replaced. The armor endured. The flesh was temporary. I approached my primary workstation, a raised platform with mag clamps capable of holding a full suit of Maxi 7 power armor in any configuration. Servo arms extended from the ceiling, equipped with brushes, sanders, welding torches, and chemical applicators. To my left, floor-to-ceiling shelves held hundreds of bottles. Sacred oils blessed by the chapter's chaplains, industrial solvents capable of dissolving plasteel pigments for touch-up work, in the Blood Angels' distinctive red and gold and specialized compounds, whose purposes I had learned through decades of experience rather than any formal instruction. Today's assignment was already waiting for me, delivered during the night cycle by servitors, whose lobotomized brains asked no questions about their cargo. The armor stood locked in the mag clamps, and I felt my breath catch despite myself. It was Brother Captain Donatos' suit. I recognized it immediately by the ornate aquila worked into the chest plate and the personal heraldry on the left shoulder guard. A golden chalice surrounded by droplets of red. Donatos commanded the 5th Company, one of the Blood Angels' battle companies, and I had cleaned his armor 11 times over the past decade. Each time, I learned a little more about the man inside it, but this was different. The armor was scorched black across the entire right side. The ceramite cracked in 17 places that I could count from where I stood. The right arm was missing entirely, sheared off at the shoulder by something with enough force to cut through reinforced ceramite and plasteel cabling. The chest plate bore 3 deep gouges that had penetrated the outer layer and scored the inner ablative plating. Whatever had done this had come within centimeters of killing Donatos. I activated my data slate and logged the armor's arrival. 5th Company, Brother Captain Donatos, Mark 7th Maximus pattern, condition, severe battle damage, status, priority repair. The slate chimed softly, acknowledging the entry and automatically notifying the Reclusium's master of the forge that critical work was underway. The cleaning always came first. No matter how extensive the damage, no matter how urgently the armor was needed, I had to remove the residue of battle before any repair work could begin. It was part of the ritual, part of the respect we showed to both the armor and the warrior who wore it. I started with the sacred oils, as I always did. The first bottle contained a mixture blessed by Chaplain Argastes himself, infused with drops of blood from the chapter's sanguinary priests, and mixed with minerals scraped from the walls of the chamber of sarcophagi, where the blood angels' fallen heroes rested in honored death. I poured a measure into my palm and approached the armor, speaking the litany of cleansing as I worked. Emperor, protect this vessel of war, purify this shell of righteousness, sanctify this armor of faith. The oil went on in circular motions, applied with a cloth woven from fibers grown in the monastery's gardens. As I worked, the black scorching began to lift away, revealing the deep crimson beneath. But the smell that rose from the armor made me pause. It wasn't the usual scent of promethium exhaust or plasma discharge. This was biological, organic. Something had burned against this armor, and that something had been alive. I continued working, moving methodically from the chest plate down to the remaining arm, then the waist and legs. The mag clamps rotated the armor as needed, presenting each section for my attention. It took 3 hours to complete the initial cleaning, my shoulders aching by the end, my fingers cramped from the careful circular motions required by the ritual. When I stepped back to examine my work, I noticed something I had missed before. On the interior of the chest plate, visible only when I opened the armor's front seals, were scratch marks, deep ones. They scored the inner surface in parallel lines, 4 gouges that could only have been made by something with clawed fingers. But these scratches were made from the inside. Something inside the armor had tried to claw its way out. I stood there for a long moment, my heart beating faster than my aging body appreciated. Then I reached for my data slate and began documenting every mark, every scratch, every anomaly. This was beyond my authority to interpret, but it was absolutely within my duty to record. The first law of being an artificer in service to the Adeptus Astartes. Observe everything, assume nothing, report accurately. We were the silent witnesses to their wars, the keepers of secrets written in scorch marks and dents. We saw what they did not want seen, and we never spoke of it outside the Reclusium. But we always remembered. I worked through the day cycle and into the evening, my focus never wavering from Donatos' armor. The damaged sections would require the master of the forge's attention. Replacing the arm alone would take a skilled tech adept days of work. But I could prepare the rest, ensure that when the armor was made whole again, it would gleam with the pride of the blood angels. By the time the evening prayer bells rang through the fortress-monastery, I had catalogued 173 separate damage points, cleaned and consecrated every square centimeter of the armor's exterior, and prepared my report for the master of the forge. The scratch marks from the inside remained unexplained in my documentation. I simply noted their presence, their dimensions, and their location. As I secured my tools and prepared to leave for the night, I looked back at the armor one final time. In the dim lighting of the Armory of Penitence, it seemed almost alive, the red ceramite gleaming like fresh blood. I wondered what Donatos had faced. I wondered what he had become, even briefly, in the heat of whatever battle had damaged him so severely. Then I extinguished the lights and left, sealing the maglock door behind me with my gene-coded clearance. Some questions were not meant for artificers to answer. Our job was simpler, purer. Clean the armor, maintain the war gear, serve the chapter. But as I climbed the stairs back to the serf quarters, I couldn't shake the image of those scratches. Something had been inside that armor with Donatos, or something inside Donatos had tried to get out. Either possibility terrified me. Chapter 2. The pattern emerges. 3 days later, 2 more suits arrived in the Armory of Penitence, delivered in the deepest hours of the night cycle, when even the chaplains slept their brief standing rest. I found them waiting when I arrived for my shift, locked in separate mag clamps on the far side of my workstation. Both belonged to members of 5th Company. I recognized the heraldry immediately. Brother Malchar and Brother Tacitus, both veterans with more than 2 centuries of service to the Blood Angels. Their armor bore the campaign badges and honor markings that told the story of their wars. The Iron Skull of Armageddon, the Blessed Blade of Ophelia VII, the Crimson Tear of the Tyrannid Wars. And both suits bore the same pattern of damage I had seen on Donatos' armor. The scorching was less severe, but present. The scratches from the inside were there too, though these were shallower, as if whatever had caused them had not fully manifested. And both suits carried that same organic smell. The scent of something biological burned against sacred ceramite. I stood between the 2 suits for a long time before beginning my work, my mind racing through possibilities I had no business considering. Space Marines did not panic. They did not claw at their armor from the inside in terror or desperation. They were post-human warriors, their bodies and minds engineered to be beyond such weakness. But I had seen too much. 37 years of cleaning their armor had taught me that Space Marines were human where it mattered, in their capacity to suffer, to doubt, to fear. The Adeptus Astartes could die. They could fail. As I worked, I let my mind empty of speculation and focus on the task. This was meditation for me, the closest I came to the devotions of the chapter's chaplains. In the rhythm of cleaning, in the careful attention to every detail, I found a kind of peace. The scorching lifted away to reveal relatively minor ceramite damage beneath. A few cracks, some ablative scoring, nothing that would require extensive repair. Whatever had attacked these Marines had not pressed the engagement as far as with Donatos. Or perhaps they had withdrawn before the worst could happen. As I moved to the chest plate, preparing to open it and clean the interior, I heard footsteps behind me. Heavy footsteps. The distinctive sound of ceramite-reinforced boots on stone. I turned to find Chaplain Argastes standing in the entrance to the Armory of Penitence, his black armor absorbing the light, his skull-faced helmet tucked under one arm. His face was pale, even by Blood Angel standards, his eyes carrying the weight of centuries. A rosarius hung around his neck, the icon of his office as spiritual guardian of the chapter. Artificer-Serf, he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. The chaplains could speak with thunder when they needed to, but in private moments, they were often soft-spoken, almost kind. "You have been working on 5th Company's armor." "Yes, Chaplain," I responded, bowing my head respectfully. 3 suits in as many days. Captain Donatos, Brother Malchar, and Brother Tacitus. "And you have observed certain irregularities?" It was not a question. I had filed my reports with the Master of the Forge, and clearly they had been read by others. I chose my words carefully. "The damage patterns are unusual, my lord. The scoring is consistent with close-range combat against something biological, and there are marks on the interior surfaces that I have documented fully in my reports." Argastes approached Malchar's armor, running one gauntleted hand across the chest plate where I had been working. His expression remained neutral, but I saw something flicker in his eyes, concern perhaps, or a deeper worry. "The 5th Company returned from Sika 4 6 days ago," he said quietly. "They were deployed to investigate a loss of contact with our chapter's monitoring station on that world. What they found," he paused, seeming to consider how much to tell me. "There are Xenos in the galaxy that prey on human fear, Artificer. Things that feed on emotion as much as flesh. The Tyrannids are the most well-known, but they are far from the only threat." I remained silent, knowing that he would continue if he wished. A serf did not press a chaplain for information. Fifth Company encountered something on Sikar 4 that should not have existed, Argastes continued. A cult that had dedicated themselves to powers that twist mind and body. By the time our brothers arrived, the cultists had changed, become something other than human, something infectious in their very presence. He turned to look at me directly, his eyes hard. The red thirst responds to different stimuli in different brothers. For most, it is combat itself, the scent of blood, the rush of violence. But some triggers are more insidious. Fear can wake it. Rage and certain forms of psychic influence can cause it to rise unbidden, even in brothers who have controlled it for centuries. Understanding began to dawn. The scratches, I said carefully, from the inside. Brothers fighting their own nature, Argastes confirmed. The influence of the Xenos they faced made the thirst rise prematurely, overwhelmingly. Captain Donatos nearly succumbed entirely. Only his centuries of discipline and the support of his brothers prevented his fall. But it was close. He placed both hands on Malkar's armor, his head bowed as if in prayer. This cannot be spoken of outside the Reclusium, Artificer. The Fifth Company's honor is intact. They completed their mission and purged Sikar 4 of the Xenos corruption. But the details of how close we came to losing 3 battle brothers to the thirst must remain sealed within these walls. I understand, my lord, I said, and I did. The Blood Angel's flaw was known throughout the chapter and whispered about in the wider Imperium, but the specifics of individual struggles were kept private. To do otherwise would dishonor the warriors who fought so hard to maintain control. Continue your work, Argastes said, turning to leave. Clean their armor well, Artificer. Let them wear their honor without shame when they march to war again. He was at the doorway when I spoke again, unable to help myself. My lord, forgive me, but the armor itself, does it remember? Argastes paused, his back still to me. For a long moment, I thought he would not answer. Then he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. The machine spirits of these ancient suits have witnessed 10,000 years of war, Artificer. They remember things we cannot. They carry the echoes of every battle brother who has worn them, every moment of glory and every second of despair. Why do you think we maintain them with such care? Why do you think your work is considered sacred? He left without another word, his footsteps echoing in the stone corridor beyond. I stood alone with the armor of Fifth Company, my hands still holding the cleaning cloth, my mind struggling to process what I had learned. I had always known my work was important, but I had thought of it as simple maintenance, keeping the war gear functional and presentable. I had never considered that the armor itself might be a repository of memory, that each scratch and dent I cleaned away might carry meaning beyond the merely physical. I returned to Malkar's armor with new reverence, opening the chest plate to access the interior surfaces. The scratches were there, just as in Donatos' suit. 4 parallel lines, scored deep into the ceramite by something desperately trying to escape. As I cleaned them, applying the sacred oils with even greater care than usual, I found myself speaking to the armor. Not a formal prayer or litany, but simple words of comfort, as one might speak to a wounded friend. You protected him, I said softly. You held him together when he was falling apart. You're a good and faithful servant, and I honor you for it. The armor, of course, did not respond, but as I worked, I felt a strange sense of connection, as if the machine spirit within the ancient ceramite recognized my understanding and approved. It was a foolish thought, the kind of superstition that tech priests would mock, but I couldn't shake it. I spent the next 12 hours working on both suits, cleaning every surface, consecrating every seal and joint, preparing them for the repairs that would follow. By the time I finished, my body ached in ways that reminded me I was no longer young, that decades of chemical exposure and repetitive motion had taken their toll. But the armor gleamed, red and gold, the colors of the Blood Angels, proud and unbowed despite the damage they had sustained. When Malkar and Tacitus donned these suits again, they would wear reminders of their struggle and their victory over their own darkness. As I secured my tools and prepared my reports for the Master of the Forge, I thought about what Argastes had said, about triggers and influence, about how even Space Marines could be pushed to the edge of control, about how close Fifth Company had come to losing 3 brothers, not to the enemy, but to themselves. I had always known the Blood Angels carried a burden. Everyone in the chapter knew about the Red Thirst and its darker cousin, the Black Rage, but knowing about it in abstract terms was different from seeing the physical evidence of a warrior, his struggle to maintain his humanity. That night, I did not sleep well. I dreamed of scratching sounds, of something trapped and desperate, of red armor that moved without a warrior inside it. When I woke in the darkness of the serf quarters, my sheets were soaked with sweat and my heart was pounding. But when morning came, I returned to the Armory of Penitence and continued my work. Because that was what artificers did. We saw the truth of the Space Marines' wars and we kept their secrets, and we honored them by making their armor shine, even when those truths terrified us. Chapter 3. The Blood Dream. The Fourth Company deployed to the Crow's World system on the 13th day of the month, and they returned 6 weeks later with casualties I could barely comprehend. Of the 87 Marines who had boarded the strike cruiser, Blessed Sorrow, only 63 returned. And of those 63, 22 were delivered directly to the Tower of Amareo, the place where the Blood Angels who had fallen completely to the Black Rage were housed, lost forever to the death visions of their Primarch. I learned this not from official channels, but from the whispered conversations of other serfs, from the unusual emptiness in the fortress-monastery's halls, from the way the chaplains moved with grim purpose rather than their usual measured calm. The Blood Angels did not announce their failures publicly, but within the walls of their home, truth could not be entirely hidden. What it meant for me was work, endless work. The Armory of Penitence filled with damaged armor, each suit telling a story of desperation and fury. The Master of the Forge assigned 3 additional artificers to assist me, pulling them from other duties, because the sheer volume of repair work required all hands. I found myself working 20-hour shifts, sleeping in brief 4-hour blocks before returning to the endless task of cleaning, documenting, and preparing armor for repair. My fingers bled from chemical burns. My lungs rattled with the metallic dust of ceramite and the fumes of industrial solvents. But I continued because this was my purpose, my service to the chapter that had given me life and meaning. On the 3rd day after Fourth Company's return, I received a suit of armor that made my breath stop in my chest. It belonged to Brother Lucanis, a sergeant in the Fourth Company with 312 years of service. I had cleaned his armor exactly 9 times over my career, and each time I had marveled at its condition. Lucanis was meticulous about maintenance, the kind of warrior who treated his war gear with genuine affection. His armor always arrived in relatively good condition, despite whatever battles he had fought, because he took personal responsibility for its care between campaigns. Not this time. The armor was a ruin. The chest plate was caved in, crushed by something with incredible strength. Both arms were missing, torn away at the shoulders. The helmet was split down the middle, the sacred faceplate cracked in 2, and every surface was covered in blood. So much blood that the armor's red coloring was invisible beneath layers of dried, blackened gore. But what stopped my breath wasn't the damage, it was the smell. The blood was human. I knew this with the certainty of 37 years' experience. I had cleaned Space Marine armor covered in Xeno's ichor, demon filth, and every form of alien bodily fluid imaginable. This was different. This was human blood, and a lot of it. I activated my data slate with trembling fingers and began the logging process. Fourth Company, Sergeant Lucanis, Mark 7 Maximus pattern, condition, catastrophic battle damage, status, critical evaluation required before repair. But before I could continue, a hand gripped my shoulder. I spun, startled, to find Chaplain Argastes behind me. His face was haggard, his eyes carrying a weight I had never seen before. "You will not document the condition of this armor in detail," he said quietly. "You will clean it, prepare it for repair, and you will record only that it sustained severe battle damage. Nothing more." "My lord, the protocols require—" "The protocols are suspended for Fourth Company's armor," Argastes interrupted. By order of Chapter Master Dante himself. There are truths that serve no purpose in preservation, Artificer. This is one of them. He released my shoulder and stood back, his posture military rigid, but his expression almost pleading. Brother Lucanus died with honor, defending his brothers until his last breath. That is what will be remembered. The circumstances of his death are sealed by the reclusium. I looked at the armor again, at the crushed chest plate and the missing arms, at the human blood that covered every surface. A terrible understanding was beginning to form in my mind, a picture I did not want to complete. Did he fall? I asked, the words barely a whisper. Argastes was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded once, sharply. The black rage took him in the midst of battle. In his madness, believing himself to be sanguinius fighting Horus at the end of all things, he turned on his squad brothers. It took 5 of them to bring him down. 3 were killed in the process. Lucanus died believing he had killed a traitor, never knowing the truth of what he had become. My legs felt weak. I had to reach out and steady myself against the mag-clamp platform. Lucanus had been one of the good ones, one of the Marines who treated serfs with genuine respect, who remembered our names and thanked us for our service. I had admired him from the distance that separated post-human from baseline human, and he had died killing his brothers, lost in a nightmare vision that overwrote reality itself. How many? I asked, not sure I wanted the answer. How many of 4th Company fell to the rage? 31, Argastes said, and his voice carried the weight of mountains. 31 battle brothers lost their minds on Crow's World. 22 survived their brothers' attempts to restrain them, and now rage in the Tower of Amario, beyond all reach of reason. 9 died in the restraint, killing 14 of their squad mates in the process before they could be put down. Numbers, cold numbers that meant something terrible. 4th Company had deployed at full strength, 100 Marines, one of the Blood Angel's precious battle companies. They had returned with 63, and of those, many would be mentally scarred by what they had witnessed. Brothers killing brothers, friends forced to execute friends who had become ravening monsters. What happened on Crow's World? I asked. Argastes moved to the armor, running his hand across the crushed chest plate almost reverently. They were sent to purge a Genestealer cult that had infested the primary hive city, but the cult was older than our intelligence suggested and more deeply rooted. By the time 4th Company breached the cult's central chamber, the Patriarch had been in place for 6 generations. The psychic scream of the hive mind was overwhelming. He turned to look at me, and I saw actual tears in his eyes, something I had never witnessed from a chaplain. The red thirst is triggered by blood and violence, but the black rage comes from psychic trauma. The death of our Primarch echoes through the genetic memory of every Blood Angel, waiting to be awakened by sufficient stress. The Patriarch's psychic death throes, combined with the intensity of close-quarters battle in darkness and blood, it was a perfect storm. Brothers began falling to the rage one by one, and each one that fell made it worse for the others, until finally Captain Castor ordered a full retreat. But they completed the mission, I said, remembering what he had told me about 5th Company. You said Lucanus died with honor. The mission was completed, Argastes confirmed. Captain Castor ordered orbital bombardment of the entire hive city. 1 billion human souls, burned to ash to ensure the cult was destroyed. Then he loaded his surviving brothers aboard the strike cruiser and returned home. 22 of them are now locked in the Tower of Amarillo, living their final battle over and over until their bodies finally give out. 9 are dead, buried with full honors in the chamber of sarcophagi, and the rest carry the memory of killing their own brothers. He straightened, his chaplain's discipline reasserting itself. This is the burden of the Blood Angels, Artificer. This is why we call ourselves cursed. We are the Emperor's finest warriors, capable of defeating any Xenos threat, of standing against the horrors of chaos itself. But our greatest enemy is within us, written into our very genes, and it can destroy us more completely than any external foe. I looked at Lucanus's armor, at the blood that covered it, and I understood finally why Artificer had ordered me to minimize my documentation. This armor told a story of failure and tragedy, of the Blood Angel's flaw claiming another victim. Recording that story in detail would serve only to remind future artificers of what could happen, would force them to look at each suit of armor and wonder if its wearer would be the next to fall. "I will clean it," I said quietly. "I will restore it to glory, and I will honor Brother Lucanus's memory by making it shine." Artificer placed his hand on my shoulder again, this time gently. "Thank you, Artificer. Your service is more valuable than you know. The chapter endures because of brothers like Lucanus, and because of serfs like you who preserve their honor even after death." He left me alone with the armor, and I began the long process of cleaning away the blood. It took 6 hours to remove all of it, working with increasingly aggressive solvents as the layers of gore proved resistant to gentler chemicals. The entire time I found myself thinking about Lucanus, remembering the few times he had spoken to me, the way he had always checked his armor carefully after I returned it to him, the pride he had taken in his appearance. Had he known, I wondered, that the black rage waited for him? Did all Blood Angels carry that knowledge, that any battle could be their last, not because of the enemy, but because of their own genetics? What kind of courage did it take to march to war knowing that you might turn on your brothers, that you might die killing the very people you had sworn to protect? As I cleaned the interior of the chestplate, I found more of those scratches, the marks of a warrior trying to escape his own armor. But these were different from the ones I had seen on 5th Company's war gear. These were deeper, more frantic, and they extended across almost the entire interior surface. Lucanus had been conscious as the black rage took him, aware enough to know what was happening, and he had tried desperately to free himself from the armor before he could harm his brothers. He had failed. The armor had been too strong, the restraints too secure, and so he had fought in full battle plate, his enhanced strength and centuries of experience turned against the men he loved. I found myself crying as I worked, tears falling onto the ceramite and mixing with the cleaning solutions. I had never cried while working before. I had seen terrible things, had cleaned armor bearing evidence of atrocities and horrors beyond naming, and I had always maintained my professional detachment. But this was different. This was personal. This was a good man, destroyed by the very thing that made him superhuman. By the time I finished cleaning Lucanus's armor, documenting only the most basic damage reports as Artificer had instructed, it was deep into the night cycle. The armory of penitence was silent, except for the quiet hum of machinery and the distant sound of prayer bells from the fortress-monastery's upper levels. I stood before the armor now clean and ready for the extensive repairs it would require, and I spoke a prayer I had learned as a child before I was taken by the Blood Angels to serve as a serf. Emperor, watch over this warrior's soul. Guide him to your light. Forgive him his failings. Remember his service. Let him rest in peace, knowing his duty was fulfilled and his honor intact. It wasn't much. It wasn't the elaborate funerary rites the chaplains would perform, or the grand ceremonies that marked the passing of great heroes. But it was sincere, and it was all I had to offer. As I secured my tools and prepared to leave for a few hours of sleep, I looked back at the armor one last time. In the dim lighting, it almost seemed to stand at attention, a silent sentinel waiting for a warrior who would never return. The armor would be repaired, I knew. It would be consecrated and blessed, and eventually, it would be assigned to a new battle brother, someone worthy of wearing such a storied suit. The machine spirit would carry Lucanus's memory forward, adding his experience to the countless others who had worn this armor over millennia. But I would remember the blood. I would remember the scratches from the inside. And I would never forget that even the Emperor's finest could fall not to the enemy, but to themselves. That night I dreamed I was wearing power armor trapped inside ceramite that would not open, and I was clawing frantically at the interior surfaces while something dark and terrible rose up from inside me, overwhelming my mind with visions of blood and death. I woke screaming, tangled in my sheets, my fingers cramped as if I had actually been scratching at something. The other serfs in the dormitory ignored my screams. We all had nightmares. It came with the job. Chapter 4. the floor made flesh. The summons came during my rest cycle, delivered by a servo skull whose hollow voice crackled with age and static. Artificer Vorel, report immediately to the Tower of Amareo. Authorization Chaplain Argastes, priority, Maximus. I had never been to the Tower of Amareo. No artificer had, to my knowledge. That was where the Death Company was housed, the Blood Angels who had fallen completely to the Black Rage and existed only to fight one final battle before death claimed them. It was a place of sorrow and horror, sealed away from the rest of the fortress-monastery, visited only by the chapter's chaplains and the sanguinary priests who maintained the fallen warriors' bodies. I dressed quickly and followed the servo skull through corridors I had never traveled, descending deeper into the fortress monastery than I had known was possible. The air grew colder with each level, and the stone walls were carved with names, thousands upon thousands of names, each one a blood angel who had fallen to the rage over the chapter's 10,000 years of history. The Tower of Amareo was not actually a tower. It was a subterranean vault, buried deep in Baal Secundus's bedrock, as far from the sky as the chapter could build. The entrance was a massive adamantium door, sealed with locks that required 3 separate gene codes to open. Chaplain Argastes waited there, his black armor seeming to absorb what little light reached this depth. "You will see things that will haunt you," he said without preamble. "You will hear things that will disturb your sleep for years to come. But what I am about to show you cannot be fully explained. It must be witnessed. Do you understand?" "No, my lord," I answered honestly, "but I will serve as required." He almost smiled at that. "Good answer. Come." The doors opened with a sound like a death rattle, pneumatic seals releasing with gasps of stale air. Beyond was a corridor lit by flickering red lumen strips, the walls covered in prayers and scripture carved deep into the stone. I could hear sounds echoing from deeper in, screams of rage, the crash of ceramite against metal, the mindless chanting of warriors lost to madness. We passed cell after cell, each one a cube of reinforced metal 4 meters on a side. Through small viewing ports, I glimpsed the Death Company, space marines in black armor, their faces twisted with rage and madness, their voices crying out words from 10,000 years ago, reliving Sanguinius's final battle aboard the War Master's flagship. "I am your death, traitor. For the Emperor, for Baal. Father, forgive me." The voices overlapped, a chorus of madness that made my skin crawl. These had been noble warriors once, brothers to the Blood Angels who still fought with minds intact. Now they were nothing but rage and visions, barely restrained by the cells that held them. Argastes led me past 23 cells before stopping at one near the end of the corridor. Through the viewing port, I could see a space marine sitting in the corner, his black armor scored with impact marks from where he had thrown himself against the walls. Unlike the others, he was silent, his head bowed, his massive hands clenched into fists. "Brother Aridus," Argastes said quietly, "Assault Marine, 4th Company, fell to the rage on Crow's World. He has been here for 47 days. Why show me him specifically?" I asked, then immediately regretted the question. Serfs did not question chaplains, but Argastes didn't rebuke me. Instead, he produced a key from his armor and unlocked a panel beside the cell door. Inside was a data slate showing medical readouts I couldn't fully interpret, but I recognized the vital signs of a space marine: heart rate, blood pressure, neural activity. "Aridus is dying," Argastes said. "His body is consuming itself, burning through nutrients faster than we can replenish them. The Black Rage is not sustainable. Those who fall to it typically survive between 3 months and a year before their enhanced metabolism destroys them from within. Aridus will be dead within 4 weeks." He looked at me directly. "When he dies, his armor will come to you, and it will be different from anything you have cleaned before. I want you to be prepared." "Different how, my lord?" Argastes gestured to the data slate. "The Black Rage is not simply madness, Artificer. It is a genetic memory so vivid, so overwhelming, that it overwrites the warrior's own consciousness completely. Aridus does not know he is Aridus. He believes, with absolute conviction, that he is sanguineous, and that he is fighting aboard the vengeful spirit against Horus. Every moment of every day, he lives that final battle. He feels his father's anguish at having to kill his beloved brother. He experiences the betrayal, the rage, the ultimate sacrifice. He paused, choosing his words carefully. And his body responds to those experiences. His armor has recorded changes, physical changes that should not be possible. You need to understand this before you work on his armor, because what you see will challenge everything you believe about the nature of reality. Before I could respond, Aridus rose suddenly to his feet, moving with the fluid grace that all space marines possess despite their massive size. He approached the viewing port, and I saw his face for the first time. It was beautiful and terrible in equal measure. His features were perfect, almost angelic, his eyes burning with an inner light that seemed to illuminate his entire face. But blood leaked continuously from his tear ducts, running down his cheeks like crimson tears, and his mouth was set in a grimace of infinite sorrow. "Brother," he said, and his voice was nothing like the screams of rage from the other cells. It was clear, noble, filled with authority and grief. "Brother, why? Why did you betray us? Everything we built, everything we fought for, why?" He was looking directly at me, but I knew he didn't see me. He saw Horus. He saw the War Master, his father's favorite son, the betrayer who had plunged the galaxy into civil war. "I loved you," Aridus continued, and tears of blood fell faster. "More than any of the others, I loved you, and you killed us all. You killed our father's dream. Why, brother? Why?" Then his expression twisted with rage, and he slammed his fist against the cell door hard enough to make the adamantium ring. "I will see you dead for this. I will tear out your treacherous heart and feed it to you. I am the angel. I am death incarnate. I am—" He stopped suddenly, his face shifting again to sorrow. The emotional transitions were instantaneous, terrifying in their totality. This was not a man struggling with emotions. This was someone experiencing the full spectrum of Sanguinius's final moments, compressed and repeating endlessly. "He will cycle like that until his death," Astartes said, closing the panel and stepping away from the cell. Rage, sorrow, love, betrayal, all the emotions of that final confrontation. The black rage burns through them with the same intensity that consumes their bodies. We walked on, leaving Aridus behind, though I could hear his voice echoing after us. "Brother, please. There is still time to turn back. We can still save you." The chaplain led me to a chamber at the end of the corridor, a space that served as a workshop and medical bay combined. Here, I saw what he had brought me to witness. Armor, 22 suits of it, all black, all bearing the modifications that marked them as Death Company. The red crosses on the shoulder plates, the chains and parchments hanging from every surface, the death's head imagery that proclaimed these warriors as already lost. But it was the condition of the armor that made me stop and stare. Every suit showed signs of physical transformation. Chest plates that had been expanded from the inside, the ceramite cracked and bulging as if something had tried to burst out. Helmets with additional vents cut into the faceplate, crude modifications made without tools, just raw strength tearing through reinforced materials. Gauntlets whose fingers had been lengthened, the joints distorted, the proportions all wrong. And growing on several suits, I saw something that made my rational mind rebel against what my eyes were showing me. Feathers. Actual feathers, white and pure, sprouting from the armor's surface as if the ceramite itself had become organic. "It's not possible," I whispered. "No," Astartes agreed. "It should not be. But the Black Rage does not obey the laws of possibility. It is a psychic phenomenon made physical, a genetic memory so strong that it literally transforms those who experience it. The warriors of the Death Company do not simply believe they are sanguineous. Their bodies begin to change to match that belief. Wings start to form, vestigial and useless, but undeniably real. Their bones lengthen, Their features shift to more closely resemble the Primarch. The transformation is never complete before death claims them, but it is real. I approached the nearest suit, reaching out to touch one of the white feathers. It felt real, soft, delicate, utterly wrong attached to cold ceramite. My hand was shaking. How? I asked. How is this possible? The Primarchs were not human, Astartes said. They were the Emperor's finest creations, shaped by arts that no longer exist and using knowledge that has been lost for 10 millennia. Sanguinius possessed actual wings, functional and powerful. That genetic template exists somewhere in every Blood Angel's body, dormant, waiting. The Black Rage awakens it. He moved to stand beside me, both of us staring at the impossible feathers. You asked me once if the armor remembers. I said yes, but I did not tell you the full truth. The armor does not just remember, it responds. The machine spirits of these ancient suits are linked to their wearers in ways we do not fully understand. When a Blood Angel falls to the Black Rage and begins to transform, the armor transforms with him, trying to accommodate the changes, trying to protect its wearer, even as that wearer ceases to be himself. These suits, I said slowly, understanding dawning. When their wearers die, what happens to them? What? They are taken apart, Astartes said quietly. Every piece is separated, consecrated, and stored in sealed vaults. They are never reassembled, never worn again. The machine spirits have witnessed the rage too intimately, have been changed by it too deeply. To wear such armor again would risk the new wearer falling more easily to the same fate. He turned to face me fully. You will clean Aridus's armor when he dies. You will document every change, every impossible modification, every feather that has grown from ceramite that should be inorganic. And then you will help disassemble it, seal its pieces in separate containers, and consign it to the vaults. This is the truth of your service, Artificer. You do not just maintain our armor, you help us hide the evidence of our deepest failures. I wanted to argue, to say that this was not failure but tragedy, that these warriors were victims, not criminals. But I understood what he meant. The Blood Angel's reputation in the wider Imperium depended on their perceived perfection. If the truth about the Black Rage became widely known, if images of these transformed suits reached other chapters, or Emperor forbid, the High Lords of Terror, it could mean the end of the Blood Angels. They could be declared unstable, too corrupted by their genetic heritage to be trusted. I will serve, I said, because what else could I say? Astartes placed his hand on my shoulder in what I had come to recognize as his gesture of respect and appreciation. You already have, my friend, more than you know. Every artificer who works in the Reclusium carries these secrets, and every one of you has chosen to bear that burden in silence. The chapter endures because of warriors like Aridus, and because of serfs like you. We left the Tower of Amario together, ascending back toward the fortress-monastery's inhabited levels. Behind us, the screams of the Death Company continued, a constant reminder of the Blood Angel's curse. But I understood now why the armor was so important, why the cleaning and maintenance was considered sacred. The armor was not just equipment, it was witness, recorder, and victim all at once. It bore the marks of transformation and madness, and it was our job to ensure those marks were properly hidden or properly preserved, depending on what served the chapter best. When we reached the upper levels, and I prepared to return to my quarters, Astartes stopped me one final time. Brother Aridus has 17 days left, by our estimates, he said. I wanted you to see him alive, so that when you clean his armor, you remember he was a person once. He had hopes and fears and brothers he loved. The Black Rage took all of that from him, but it cannot take away the service he gave before his fall. Remember that. I will, my lord, I promised. And I did. When Aridus's armor came to me 19 days later, when I saw the transformed ceramite and the white feathers growing from its surface, when I documented every impossible change before helping seal the pieces away forever, I remembered the noble face and the voice that spoke with Sanguinius's authority and grief. I remembered, and I honored him the only way I could. by making even his cursed armor shine before it was consigned to eternal darkness. Chapter 5. The Choice. The chapter master sent for me on the 73rd day after 4th Company's return. I received the summons while working on a relatively simple repair, replacing the seal mechanisms on a scout's armor, tedious work that required precision but little creative thinking. The servo skull that delivered the message bore Chapter Master Dante's personal seal, and my hands went numb with fear when I saw it. In 37 years of service, I had never been summoned by the Chapter Master. Few serfs were. Dante was a being of legend, the oldest space marine in the Imperium, save perhaps the Emperor himself, entombed in the Golden Throne. To meet him in person was an honor that left me terrified and confused in equal measure. I cleaned myself as well as I could, scrubbing the chemical stains from my hands and changing into the cleanest robes I possessed. Then I followed the servo skull through the fortress-monastery to the central tower, where the chapter master maintained his personal chambers and conducted the business of leading the Blood Angels. The guards at the tower entrance, 2 Terminators in ancient suits of tactical dreadnought armor, watched me pass without comment, but I felt their gaze like physical weight. At the top of a seemingly endless spiral staircase, I found myself before ornate doors, carved with scenes from the Blood Angels' 10,000 years of history. The servo skull chirped once, and the doors opened, revealing a chamber that took my breath away. The room was circular, with walls covered in honor rolls and battle standards dating back to the Great Crusade. Weapons hung in display cases, each one a relic from some legendary engagement. And standing at a window that looked out over Baal Secundus's crimson deserts was Dante himself, his golden death mask catching the setting sun's light. He turned as I entered, and I immediately dropped to one knee, my head bowed in respect and fear. "Artificer-Vorel," he said, his voice muffled by the death mask, but still carrying absolute authority. "Rise and approach. I did not summon you to kneel." I stood on unsteady legs and walked forward until I stood a respectful distance from him. This close, I could see the incredible detail of his armor, every surface covered in purity seals and oath papers, every plate bearing the marks of 10,000 years of war. This was not just armor. This was history made physical. "You have served the chapter for 37 years, Dante said, not quite a question. "You have worked in the Reclusium for all that time, maintaining the armor of our brothers, keeping our secrets, witnessing our failures." "Yes, my lord," I managed to say, "and you have never spoken of what you have seen. Not to other serfs, not to your family before they passed, not even in your sleep according to the dormitory monitors." He paused. "That kind of discretion is rare and valuable." He moved to a desk in the center of the room, where a data slate lay displaying information I couldn't read from this distance. "Chaplain Argastes has given you special access over the past months. You have seen the Tower of Amareo. You have witnessed the Death Company. You understand the true nature of our flaw in ways that few outside the chapter's leadership do. I have been honored by that trust, my lord." "Have you?" Dante asked, and there was something almost sad in his voice. "Or have you been burdened by it? Chaplain Argastes tells me you have nightmares, that you wake screaming, that you have requested additional work shifts to avoid sleeping." I said nothing, unsure how to respond. It was true that sleep had become difficult, that closing my eyes meant seeing Aridus's face, or Lucanus's blood-covered armor, or the scratches from the inside of ceramite plate. But I had not complained, had not requested relief or reassignment. "I am giving you a choice," Dante said, turning to face me fully. "A choice that I have given to only 3 other serfs in my 1,500 years of leading this chapter. You may continue your work in the Reclusium, keeping our secrets and bearing the burden of our shame, or you may transfer to other duties, the fortress monastery's kitchens perhaps, or the agricultural domes. You would still serve the chapter, but you would not be privy to our deepest failures." He gestured to the data slate. "If you choose to stay, I will promote you to Master Artificer, the highest rank a serf can hold in the Reclusium. You will supervise the other artificers, manage the armor maintenance schedules, and serve as the primary liaison between the Artificer Corps and the chaplains. Your knowledge and discretion would be invaluable in that role. And if I choose to leave, I asked quietly, then you will be transferred with full honors and no stain on your record. Your memories of the Tower of Amareo and the Death Company will be suppressed through hypnotic therapy, not erased entirely, but made distant, like a half-remembered dream. You would serve out your remaining years in peace, free of nightmares, free of the burden of knowing what you know. It was the second option that shocked me more than the first. The Blood Angels could suppress memories. They had that capability and chose not to use it on artificers as a matter of course. That meant the nightmares, the knowledge, the burden. It was all intentional. They wanted us to remember, to carry that weight. Why? I asked, then immediately regretted the question. But Dante did not seem offended. Because we cannot carry it alone, he said simply. The chaplains who tend the Death Company, the sanguinary priests who monitor our genetic degradation, the commanders who send brothers to their deaths, knowing some will fall to the rage. We bear terrible knowledge. But if we are the only ones who know, if we hide our failures completely, even from those who serve us most closely, then we become isolated in our suffering. We become the monsters we fear we are. He moved closer, and I forced myself not to step back. Even centuries old, even wearing the death mask that proclaimed his acceptance of mortality, Dante radiated power that was almost painful to stand near. You and the other artificers serve as witnesses, he continued. You see what we do, what we become, when the floor claims us. And by seeing it, by choosing to continue serving us, despite knowing the truth, you remind us that we are still worth serving, that our mission still matters, even though we are broken. I thought about what he was saying, about the weight of it. The Blood Angels needed us not just to maintain their armor, but to validate their existence, to say through our continued service that yes, they were cursed, but they were also noble. Yes, they sometimes became monsters, but they were still the Emperor's angels. If I stay, I said slowly, will it get worse? Will I see more things like Aridus, like Lucanus? Yes, Dante said without hesitation. The floor grows worse with each generation. More brothers fall to the rage with each passing century. One day, perhaps within the next 1,000 years, the Blood Angels will cease to exist as a functioning chapter, consumed entirely by the curse written into our genes. If you stay, you will witness that decline. You will clean the armor of dead heroes and document the evidence of our genetic doom. Then why continue? I asked. If the end is inevitable, why keep fighting? Dante reached up and removed his death mask, revealing a face that was ancient beyond measure. His skin was pale as parchment, lined with scars from 1,000 battles. His eyes were tired, carrying the weight of 1,500 years of leadership and loss. But there was still strength there, still determination. Because the Imperium needs us, he said simply. Because there are threats that only Space Marines can face, and because every day we continue to fight is another day that humanity survives. We are damned, Artificer Voral. We know this. We have always known this. But we are damned in service to something greater than ourselves, and that gives our damnation meaning. He replaced the mask, becoming again the legend rather than the man. So I ask you to choose. Stay and bear witness to our decline, knowing that your work matters even if it cannot save us. Or go in peace, your service honored, your burden lifted. There is no wrong answer. Some people are meant to know terrible things, and some are meant to be spared them. Only you can know which you are. I stood in silence for a long time, thinking about everything I had seen and learned. I thought about the scratches from inside the armor, about Aridus's transformation, about Lucanus's blood covering every surface of his war gear. I thought about the nightmares and the chemical burns, and the 37 years I had already given to this work. And I thought about the armor itself, gleaming after I had cleaned it, ready to carry another warrior into battle. I thought about the machine spirits that remembered and endured, about the honor I felt when I made something beautiful out of tragedy. "I will stay," I said. Dante nodded, as if he had expected this answer. "Then you are hereby promoted to Master Artificer, with all the responsibilities and authorities that position entails. You will supervise 7 junior artificers, manage the Armory of Penitence, and serve as my direct representative in all matters relating to armor maintenance and documentation." He moved to his desk and retrieved a data slate, which he handed to me. "These are the records of the Death Company for the past 50 years. Every warrior who has fallen, every transformation documented, every piece of armor sealed in the vaults. You will maintain these records going forward, ensuring that future generations understand what we were and what we became." I took the data slate with trembling hands. The weight of it seemed immense, though it was no heavier than the ones I used for daily documentation. "One more thing," Dante said. "You asked why we continue fighting if the end is inevitable. I want you to understand something that the chaplains sometimes forget. We do not fight despite our curse. We fight because of it. The red thirst makes us savage, but it also makes us fierce protectors. The black rage is madness, but it produces warriors of such fury that enemies flee before them. We are not great warriors despite being broken. We are great warriors because being broken taught us what is worth protecting." He gestured toward the window, toward the crimson deserts of Baal Secundus spreading to the horizon. "Every serf in this fortress-monastery chose to stay when they learned the truth about us. Everyone could have transferred away, taken service with another chapter, lived without nightmares. But they stayed, because they understand what you now understand, that serving the broken can be as noble as serving the perfect. Perhaps more so." I looked at the data slate in my hands, at the accumulated weight of 50 years of documented failure and tragedy. Then I looked at Dante, at the ancient warrior who had led his cursed chapter for 15 centuries and would continue to lead until death finally claimed him. "I will serve with honor," I said, "and I will ensure that every brother who falls is remembered not for his failure, but for all the years he resisted it." "That," Dante said, "is all I ask. You are dismissed, Master Artificer Vorel. Return to your work." I bowed deeply and turned to leave. As I reached the door, Dante spoke one more time. "Vorel, thank you for seeing what we are and choosing to stay anyway. That means more than you know." I nodded, not trusting my voice, and left the chapter master's chamber. As I descended the spiral staircase, I felt the weight of my decision settling over me like a cloak. I would have nightmares for the rest of my life. I would see terrible things and document them with clinical precision. I would witness the slow genetic death of one of the Imperium's most legendary chapters, but I would also ensure that their story was told honestly, that their struggles were recorded with respect, and that when the Blood Angels finally fell to their curse completely, there would be records showing they had fought it every step of the way. That night, I returned to the Armory of Penitence and looked at the work waiting for me. 3 suits of armor from 3rd Company, damaged but whole, ready to be cleaned and restored. I put on my work apron, activated the mag clamps, and began the familiar ritual of applying sacred oils and speaking the litany of cleansing. The nightmares would come. They always did. But so would the morning, and with it, more armor to clean, more stories to preserve, more proof that even the broken could be beautiful when treated with proper care. Chapter 6. The Master's Craft. The first thing I did as Master Artificer was reorganize the Armory of Penitence. Not the physical space that had been arranged by artificers far more experienced than I would ever be, but the documentation systems and workflow processes that had grown haphazard over the decades. If I was going to supervise 7 artificers and maintain the Death Company records, I needed systems that could scale with the work. I spent 3 weeks developing new protocols, all while maintaining my regular duties. Each piece of armor now required 3 separate documentation passes: initial condition assessment, detailed cleaning and repair notes, and final post-restoration verification. Every anomaly had to be photographed from 3 angles and logged with specific terminology from a standardized lexicon I created. Nothing was left to individual interpretation. The other artificers resented it at first. Jekka, who was only 5 years younger than me and had expected to be promoted to Master Artificer himself, barely spoke to me for a month. Young Saraband seemed perpetually overwhelmed by the new requirements. Old Morthan simply ignored most of my directives, continuing to work exactly as he had for the past 40 years. But Chaplain Argastes supported me completely, and that made all the difference. When Jekka complained about the increased documentation burden, Argastes pointed out that my systems had already helped identify 3 cases of armor degradation that would have gone unnoticed under the old protocols. When Morthan refused to photograph anomalies, Argastes quietly suggested that artificers who could not adapt to new requirements might be better suited to work in the fortress-monastery's kitchens. After that, compliance improved dramatically. The real test came 6 weeks into my new role, when 7th Company returned from a campaign in the hive city of Thrax Prime. They had been deployed to clear an orc infestation from the lower levels, 3 months of close quarters fighting in darkness and toxic fumes. Of the 92 Marines who deployed, 81 returned, and all 81 suits of armor arrived in the Armory of Penitence bearing damage that told a story of sustained, brutal combat. I stood before the arrival bay, looking at the rows of damaged war gear, and realized I had never managed a project of this scope before. As a regular artificer, I had focused on individual suits, taking whatever time was necessary to restore each one to perfection. But as Master Artificer, I had to think about throughput, prioritization, resource allocation. I had to be an administrator as much as a craftsman. I divided the work into categories: critical, armor too damaged to be combat effective; high priority, armor of officers and specialists; standard, functional but requiring significant repair; and minor, cosmetic damage only. Then I assigned each of my 7 artificers specific responsibilities based on their strengths. Jekka took the jump pack repairs, as he always had. Morthan handled weapons maintenance. Saraband and 2 other junior artificers began the initial cleaning on the standard category suits. The remaining artificers split the high priority work between them. I personally took the 3 critical category suits, including Brother Captain Reynes's armor, which had sustained a direct hit from an orc rocket launcher and bore a hole through the chest plate large enough to fit my fist through. The work consumed us for 18 days. We operated in rotating shifts, ensuring the Armory of Penitence was never unstaffed. I slept 4 hours per night in a cot I had moved into my office so I could respond immediately if any artificer encountered problems. My meals were delivered by servitors and eaten while reviewing documentation or consulting with the master of the forge about parts we needed to fabricate. It was exhausting, it was overwhelming, and it was the most purposeful I had ever felt. On the 12th day, while working on Reynes's armor, I discovered something that made me stop and reconsider everything I thought I knew about our work. The hole in his chest plate had been caused by the rocket impact, yes, but the damage around the edges showed signs of partial melting, as if something incredibly hot had touched the ceramite from the inside. When I opened the armor fully and examined the interior, I found scorch marks that could only have been made by plasma, specifically by a Space Marine's plasma gun discharging while still holstered. But Reynes's plasma pistol was undamaged. I had seen it when Morthan brought it for maintenance. So where had the plasma come from? I cross-referenced the initial documentation I had done when the armor arrived, looking for anything I might have missed. And there, in the notes section, I found a single line from the tech adept who had transported the armor. Warning: internal temperature exceeded safe parameters during extraction. I went to Chaplain Argastes with my findings, and he listened carefully before nodding slowly. Brother Captain Reynes fell to the red thirst during the final assault, he said quietly. He maintained enough control to continue fighting, to lead his squad to victory, despite the bloodlust overwhelming his senses. But his body temperature spiked to dangerous levels. The thirst burns through a warrior's metabolism, generating heat that can damage even reinforced armor from the inside. He looked at the armor, at the scorch marks I had documented. What you found is evidence of Rene's struggle to maintain control. He was literally burning up inside his armor, his enhanced biology pushed beyond its limits by the genetic curse. That he survived and regained control afterward is a testament to his extraordinary willpower. Should I document this in detail? I asked. Argastes considered. Document the physical damage, yes, but do not speculate on the cause in your official reports. Note the scorch marks as origin unknown pending further investigation. The truth can be recorded in your personal notes, the ones you keep for the Death Company archives. I understood. Official reports might be reviewed by tech adepts from other chapters, or even Imperial officials if they visited. But my personal documentation, maintained as part of my new duties, remained sealed within the Reclusium, accessible only to the chapter's leadership. This was what Dante had meant about being a witness. I saw the truth, I recorded it, but I also protected it, ensuring future Blood Angels could learn from their predecessors' struggles while preventing outsiders from using that knowledge against the chapter. As I continued working on Renes's armor over the following days, I developed a technique I had never used before. Instead of just cleaning and restoring, I began to actively read the armor's history. Every scratch, every dent, every point of wear told a story about the warrior who wore it. The way the right shoulder guard was more worn than the left indicated Rene favored sword strikes from that side. The pattern of scoring on the boots showed he spent more time in combat jumps than standard advances. The slight asymmetry in the chest plate's wear pattern suggested he habitually led charges from the right side of his squad. I couldn't explain how I knew these things. It was intuition developed over decades of handling armor, a skill that lived in my hands and eyes rather than my conscious mind. But I found that by understanding a warrior's fighting style, I could better restore his armor, reinforcing areas that would take the most stress, adjusting fit parameters slightly to accommodate movement patterns, even suggesting modifications to the tech adepts that would make the armor work better with its wearer's preferences. I began teaching this technique to my artificers, showing them how to read armor as a text written in metal and ceramite. Jekka proved particularly adept at it, his natural attention to detail making him see patterns I would have missed. Even old Morthen began to take interest, grudgingly admitting that there might be more to armor maintenance than just following established rituals. By the 18th day, 7th Company's armor was fully restored, 81 suits gleaming in the Blood Angels' colors, each one a testament to both the damage they had sustained and our skill in repairing them. I stood in the middle of the Armory of Penitence, surrounded by my work and my team's work, and felt a pride that I had never experienced as a regular artificer. This was what it meant to be Master Artificer, not just maintaining armor, but maintaining the systems that allowed armor to be maintained. Not just serving the chapter, but ensuring that service could continue efficiently, even as the workload increased. Chaplain Argastes came to inspect our work before the armor was returned to 7th Company. He walked among the suits, slowly, examining details, running his gauntleted fingers over repairs, checking seal points and joint articulations. Finally, he turned to me and nodded, turned to me, and, "Exceptional work, Master Artificer. Brother Captain Renes will wear his armor with pride." "Thank you, my lord. My team performed admirably." "They did, because you led them well." He paused, then added quietly, "Chapter Master Dante was right about you. You were meant for this work, to carry this burden. Not everyone could do it." After he left, I gathered my artificers together and thanked them individually, acknowledging each one's specific contributions. Even Jekka, who had resented my promotion, seemed pleased by the recognition. We had accomplished something significant together, and the shared experience had begun to forge us into a real team, rather than just a collection of individuals working in the same space. That night, I updated my personal documentation, the Death Company archives that were now my responsibility. I recorded Renes's near fall to the thirst, the evidence of his struggle written in scorch marks and melted ceramite. I documented his ultimate victory over the curse, his return to full control and command. This was what the archives were for. Not just recording failures, but also recording successes, showing future Blood Angels that the thirst could be resisted. that control could be maintained even in the most desperate circumstances. As I worked on the documentation, I thought about what this job had become for me. I had started as a simple artificer, cleaning armor and following established procedures. But now I was something more, a keeper of secrets, a witness to the chapter's struggles, a guardian of their history. My hands still did the physical work of maintenance, but my mind was engaged in something larger, preserving the truth of what the Blood Angels were, both their nobility and their curse. The nightmares still came. They always would. But I had learned to accept them as part of the job, as necessary as chemical burns and calloused fingers. Every artificer who worked in the Reclusium paid this price, and every one of us considered it worth paying, because someone had to remember, someone had to witness, someone had to ensure that when the Blood Angels finally fell to their genetic curse, there would be records showing they had fought it with honor every step of the way. That someone was us, the artificers, the silent witnesses, the keepers of sacred armor and terrible truths. And I would continue serving in that role until age or accident claimed me, because there was no work more important than ensuring heroes were remembered as they truly were, flawed, struggling, and transcendent in their refusal to surrender. Chapter 7, The Legacy of Service 10 Years Past. A decade of work that blurred together into a continuous cycle of armor arriving, being restored, and departing back to battle. 10 years of training new artificers as old ones retired or died. 10 years of refining my systems, updating my documentation protocols, and maintaining the delicate balance between transparency within the Reclusium and necessary secrecy beyond it. I was 73 now, ancient by serf standards. Most non-combat serfs lived to perhaps 60 before the accumulated strain of serving the Adeptus Astartes wore them down, but artificers seemed to last longer. Whether because our work was less physically demanding than other serf positions, or because the sacred oils and chemicals we worked with had some preservative effect, I couldn't say. I had known 3 artificers who lived past 80, their fingers still steady enough to work even as their backs bent and their eyes dimmed. I intended to be the 4th. My team had changed significantly over the decade. Jekka had finally moved past his resentment and become my most trusted assistant, capable of handling complex repairs without supervision. Old Morthen had died 6 years ago, collapsing at his workstation while cleaning a bolt rifle. We found him slumped over the weapon, his cleaning cloth still clutched in his hand, his face peaceful. He was given full honors by the chapter, his name added to the rolls of faithful serfs in the fortress-monastery's memorial hall. Saraband had grown into a skilled artificer, specializing in the maintenance of ancient suits, Meek 6 Corvus pattern armor and older, relics from before the Horus heresy that required special knowledge and techniques. I had 3 new junior artificers, all young and eager, all learning that maintaining Space Marine armor required as much reverence as technical skill. And I had begun to train my successor. Her name was Thessala, and she was 47 years old when I selected her from the pool of senior artificers working in the Fortress Monastery's other armories. She had spent 23 years maintaining the armor of the chapter's scout companies, work that required precision and patience, but not the psychological burden of the Reclusium. I had watched her work for 6 months before approaching her with the offer. "You understand what you would be taking on," I said, when I offered her the position of Assistant Master Artificer. "The work is harder, the hours longer, and you will see things that will haunt you." She looked at me with clear eyes, no hesitation. "I have heard the stories, Master Artificer. Every artificer knows what the Reclusium means. If you think I'm capable of bearing that weight, I will serve." "It's not about capability," I told her. "It's about choice. You have to choose this burden, knowing what it costs, or the weight will break you." She thought about that for a long moment, then nodded. "I choose it. Show me what I need to know." Training Thessala took 3 years. I taught her everything, not just the technical aspects of armor restoration, but the deeper knowledge that lived in intuition and experience. How to read a warrior's fighting style from the wear patterns on his armor. How to recognize the signs of the thirst or the rage in damage patterns that might seem random. How to balance documentation requirements with psychological self-preservation, recording terrible truths without letting them consume your every thought. Most importantly, I taught her what Dante had taught me, that we served as witnesses not to judge, but to remember, that the Blood Angels' curse did not diminish their nobility, but rather made their continued service more remarkable. That being broken, and choosing to fight anyway, was perhaps the highest form of courage. She was a quick study, absorbing knowledge with the efficiency of someone who had spent decades learning to learn. By the end of her 3rd year with me, she was handling complex repairs independently and had begun to develop her own insights, seeing patterns I had missed. It was Thessala who first noticed the statistical trend that I had been too close to see. We were reviewing the Death Company documentation together, a quarterly task that involved updating the records and analyzing patterns to help the sanguinary priests better understand the curse's progression. She pulled up a graph showing the rate of Black Rage incidents over the past 50 years and pointed to a section that showed a subtle but definite upward curve. "The rate is accelerating," she said quietly. "Not dramatically but consistently. Every year, slightly more brothers fall than the year before." I looked at the graph, seeing what she had seen, and felt a weight settle in my chest. I had known intellectually that the curse was worsening, but seeing it visualized made it undeniable. The trend line projected forward decades, and its implication was clear. At this rate, the Blood Angels would lose more battle brothers to the Rage than they could recruit and train within perhaps 300 years. 300 years sounded like a long time to a baseline human who might live 70 years at most. But for a chapter that had existed for 10 millennia, 3 centuries was nothing. The end was coming, approaching with mathematical certainty. "Has anyone else seen this?" Thessala asked. The sanguinary priests must have. They maintain their own records, far more detailed than ours, but I don't know if they've shared this analysis with the chapter leadership. I copied the graph to a secure data slate and took it to Chaplain Argastes that evening. He studied it for a long time, his expression hidden behind his skull helm, before finally speaking. "We have known the end was coming since before I was recruited," he said quietly. "Every Blood Angel knows it from the moment they learn of the curse, but knowing and seeing are different things. This graph makes our doom real in a way that theoretical knowledge cannot." "Should I share this with the chapter master?" I asked. "No, I will. Chapter Master Dante has watched this trend for 1500 years. He knows better than any of us how close we are to the edge." Argastes looked at me, his voice softening. "Your job is not to solve the curse, Artificer. It is to document it, to ensure that when we finally fall, there is a record showing we saw our doom coming and continued to fight anyway. That is the legacy you are building." I returned to the Armory of Penitence and found Thessala still there, reviewing more data. She looked up as I entered. "What did the chaplain say?" "That we document, we don't solve. Our legacy is the record we keep, not the curse we cannot cure." She nodded slowly, understanding the distinction. "Then we need to make sure our documentation is perfect. If these records are all that will remain of the Blood Angels after they fall to the curse, they need to tell the whole truth." Over the following months, Thessala and I worked together to improve the archive systems even further. We digitized decades of handwritten notes from artificers long dead. We cross-referenced Death Company records with battle reports, creating comprehensive profiles of individual warriors showing their entire service from recruitment to final fall. We developed predictive models, crude and limited, but better than nothing, that might help identify brothers at higher risk of falling to the Rage. The work was exhausting and often heartbreaking. Reading the full history of a warrior who had served with honor for 3 centuries before falling to the Rage in a single terrible moment was devastating every time, but it was also inspiring. These warriors knew they were doomed, that their genetics carried a fatal flaw, and they served anyway. They fought for an imperium that often forgot they existed, protecting humans who would never know their names. One evening, while working late in my office, I received a visitor I hadn't expected. Chapter Master Dante himself walked into the Armory of Penitence without announcement or ceremony and stood in the doorway watching me work. "Chapter Master," I said, immediately standing and bowing. "I did not expect—" "I know," he interrupted gently. "I come here sometimes, when the weight becomes too heavy. This place reminds me why we continue." He walked among the workstations, running his hand along the mag clamps and tool racks, examining the bottles of sacred oils and industrial solvents. Finally, he stopped at my primary station, where I had been working on a suit of mixed 7th armor that bore the marks of sustained combat. "Whose armor is this?" he asked. "Brother Dominicus, 3rd Company. Sustained during the defense of Bacca. Relatively minor damage, but he requested special attention to the left shoulder guard. It belonged to his training sergeant, who fell to the Black Rage 80 years ago. Dominicus inherited the piece and has worn it ever since." Dante examined the shoulder guard, noting the honor markings and the carefully maintained paintwork. "Connections," he said softly. "That is what sustains us. Not the curse we carry, but the connections we forge despite it. Dominicus honors his fallen sergeant by wearing his armor piece. You honor the fallen by maintaining their legacy. The chapter endures not because we are strong, but because we refuse to let each other fall alone." He turned to me, and even through the golden death mask, I could feel the weight of his gaze. "Chaplain Augustes showed me your statistical analysis, the trend line projecting our extinction." "I apologize if that was overstepping, my lord. I merely—" "No apology necessary. It is good work, accurate work. But I want you to understand something." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I have watched this trend for 15 centuries. I have seen the rate increase, seen more brothers fall each decade, and I have also seen us adapt, develop new techniques for resisting the thirst, new rituals for delaying the rage. Your graph shows one truth, that we are declining. But it does not show our resilience, our refusal to accept that decline as inevitable." "Do you believe the curse can be stopped?" I asked. "No," he said bluntly. "I believe we are doomed. But I also believe that doom is not the end of the story. What matters is how we face it, whether we rage against it or accept it with grace, whether we continue to serve, even knowing service cannot save us." He gestured around the armory of penitence. "This work you do, maintaining our armor and preserving our records, this is how we rage against doom with grace. You witness our failures and honor them anyway. That is the legacy that matters." After he left, I stood alone in the silent workshop for a long time, thinking about legacies and doom, and the choice to serve despite knowing service would not prevent the end. Then I returned to Dominicus's armor and continued my work, ensuring that the shoulder guard from his fallen sergeant would shine when he wore it into battle again. Because that was what artificers did. We maintained the connections, we preserved the legacies, we ensured that no warrior's service was forgotten, whether they fell in glory or succumbed to the curse. And we would continue that work until the very last blood angel fell, so that when the end came, there would be records showing they had faced it with honor intact. Chapter 8. The Final Polish. I am 81 years old now, and my hands shake when I work. The chemical burns have left permanent nerve damage, and the arthritis that all old artificers develop has made my fingers stiff and painful. But I continue, because there is no one else who knows what I know, who carries the weight I carry. The Sala has been Master Artificer for 3 years, taking over when my declining health made it clear I could no longer manage the administrative burden. But I still work in the Armory of Penitence, still clean and restore armor, still maintain the Death Company archives. This is my life, and I will not abandon it simply because my body is failing. Today's work is special, personal in a way that most of my assignments are not. The armor on my mag clamps belongs to Brother Captain Donatos, whose suit I cleaned 44 years ago when I first discovered the scratches from inside the ceramite. He has served the 5th Company with distinction for all those decades, resisting the thirst through hundreds of battles, maintaining control when many others fell. But age claims even Space Marines eventually. Not true age as baseline humans know it. Donatos is 417 years old and could theoretically fight for another century, but his body is wearing down, the accumulated damage of 4 centuries of warfare finally overwhelming even his enhanced biology. He is retiring from active service, taking a position as instructor for the chapter's neophytes, and his armor is being prepared for his successor. I clean it with special care, applying the sacred oils and speaking the litany of cleansing with more reverence than usual. This armor has seen Donatos through 4 centuries of war. It has protected him from death 1,000 times, has borne the marks of his struggles with the thirst and his ultimate victory over it. When I open the chest plate to clean the interior, I find those same scratches I documented so long ago, along with dozens more from subsequent battles. Each scratch tells a story of a moment when Donatos fought himself as much as the enemy. Each one marks a second when he nearly fell and chose not to. They are a record of heroism, more profound than any battle honor. As I work, I hear footsteps behind me and turn to find Donatos himself standing in the entrance to the Armory of Penitence. Out of armor, he is still massive, his enhanced frame towering over my bent and aged body, but there is gentleness in his expression as he approaches. "Master Artificer Vorel," he says, his voice rumbling like distant thunder. "I heard you were working on my armor personally. I wanted to thank you." "No thanks necessary, brother captain. It is my honor to serve." He moves to stand beside me, looking at his armor locked in the mag clamps. "You have cleaned this suit 63 times over the past 4 decades. I requested you specifically whenever possible. Do you know why? I assumed it was because of my experience with your armor's particular characteristics." "Partially," he admits, "but mostly because you never judged. Every time I brought this armor to you with those scratches on the inside, with evidence of how close I had come to falling, you cleaned them without comment. You never looked at me with pity or fear. You just did your work and returned my armor to me, polished and ready for the next battle." He reaches out and touches the chest plate gently, his massive fingers running over the surface I have just cleaned. "Do you know how many times I nearly killed my brothers? How many battles I fought where I was one moment from losing control completely? The scratches don't tell the whole story. They don't show the times I had to lock myself in my quarters for days after a campaign, fighting the thirst alone because I was too proud to ask for help. They don't show the nightmares where I see myself tearing apart my squad while they beg me to stop." "You never fell," I say quietly. "That is what matters. You maintained control for 4 centuries. Because I knew you would see the evidence," he says, and his voice cracks slightly. "Every time I felt the thirst rising, every time I wanted to give in and let it take me, I thought about you in this workshop, cleaning my armor, seeing the scratches, and never judging. I thought about how you would record my fall in your documentation, how my failure would become another entry in the Death Company archives, and I refused to let that happen. I refused to make you clean the blood of my brothers from my armor." He turns to face me fully, and I see tears in his eyes, something I have never witnessed from a space marine. "You saved me, Artificer, not the chaplains with their prayers, not the sanguinary priests with their rituals. You, with your silent witness and your careful documentation, you gave me a reason to maintain control when nothing else could. I don't know what to say. In 44 years of working on Donatos' armor, we have exchanged perhaps 100 words total. I never imagined my work had this kind of impact, that the simple act of maintaining his armor without judgment had helped him resist the curse. I did nothing special," I finally managed to say. "I only performed my duty. Your duty was to witness and record Donatos' counters. But you did more than that. You witnessed without judging, recorded without condemning. You saw me at my worst and continued to serve me with respect. That made all the difference." He places his hand on my shoulder, gentle despite his strength. "I came here to tell you that when I train the neophytes, when I teach them about the curse and how to resist it, I will tell them about you. I will tell them that resistance is not about strength or willpower alone. It is about having people in your life who see your struggle and choose to stand beside you anyway. You were that person for me." After he leaves, I stand alone with his armor for a long time, thinking about what he said. I had never considered that my work might have psychological impact beyond simple maintenance. I had thought of myself as a witness and record keeper, someone who saw but did not influence. But Donatos' words suggested something different, that the act of witnessing without judgment was itself a form of support, that recording without condemnation was a kind of acceptance. I complete the cleaning and begin the final polish, the last step before the armor is returned. This is my favorite part of the process, where I take the restored armor and bring it to a mirror finish, making it shine with the pride of the Blood Angels. My hands shake from the arthritis, but the motions are so familiar after 60 years that I barely notice. The ceremonial cloth moves in circles, the special polish bringing out the deep crimson of the ceramite, the gold details gleaming like captured sunlight. As I work, I think about all the armor I have cleaned over my lifetime. Thousands of suits, each one telling a story, each one carrying the marks of battles and struggles I could only imagine. I think about the warriors I have served, some who fell to the curse, some who resisted it, all who tried their best to be worthy of the armor they wore. And I think about the artificers who will come after me, who will inherit this work and this burden. Thessala and her successors, maintaining armor and keeping records, witnessing struggles and preserving legacies. The work will continue long after I'm gone, because it must. Someone has to remember, someone has to witness, Someone has to ensure that when the Blood Angels finally fall to their genetic curse, there is a record showing they fought it with honor every step of the way. I finish the polish and step back to examine my work. Donatos' armor gleams in the workshop lights, every surface perfect, every detail sharp and clean. It is ready for its next wearer, ready to protect another warrior through decades or centuries of war. The scratches from the inside have been documented in my personal records, preserved as evidence of Donatos' struggle and victory, but the armor itself shows no sign of them, gives no hint of the battles its previous wearer fought against himself. That is as it should be. The new warrior who inherits this armor does not need to know about Donatos' struggles. He needs only to know that this is good armor, well maintained, proven in battle. The rest is for the archives, for future artificers to study and learn from. Thessala enters the workshop as I am securing the armor for transport back to 5th Company. She has aged well in the years since I trained her, her face carrying the marks of stress and chemical exposure, but her eyes still sharp and clear. Beautiful work. As always, she says, examining the armor with a professional eye. Brother Captain Donatos will be pleased. His successor will wear it well, I correct gently. Donatos is done with active service. End of an era, Thessala observes. I've been reviewing the records. Donatos has one of the longest service records of any current Blood Angel. 417 years. And never fell, I add. That is the part that matters. She nods, understanding without need for elaboration. Then she hands me a data slate. New arrival, Death Company from the 9th. Fell during a boarding action against Orc Raiders. The chaplains want you to handle it personally. I take the slate and review the basic information. Brother Matthias, 184 years of service, fell to the Black Rage in the middle of a critical assault. His squad managed to restrain him before he killed any of his brothers, but it took 6 of them to bring him down. He lasted 17 days in the Tower of Amareo before his body finally gave out. I'll start on it tomorrow, I tell Thessala. I'm too tired today for Death Company work. You should retire, she says, not for the first time. You've earned rest. I'll rest when I'm dead, I reply, also not for the first time. Which won't be long now, but until then, I work. That night, I sit in my small quarters in the Serf dormitory and update my personal documentation. I add the details of my conversation with Donatos, recording his admission that my work had helped him resist the thirst. This is not standard documentation, not something that would go in the official records, but it is important nonetheless, a reminder that our work matters in ways we don't always see or understand. I think about Chapter Master Dante's words from years ago about how we serve as witnesses to remind the Blood Angels they are still worth serving. I think about the legacy we are building, the records we are keeping, the evidence we are preserving that even doomed warriors can choose honor over despair. And I think about tomorrow's work, about Brother Matthias's armor waiting in the Armory of Penitence, about the feathers that have probably grown from ceramite that should be inorganic, about the documentation I will need to complete before his armor can be disassembled and sealed away forever. The work continues. It always continues. And I will be there tomorrow, as I have been for 60 years, cleaning armor and keeping secrets, witnessing struggles and preserving legacies, ensuring that the broken can still shine when treated with proper care, because that is what artificers do. We polish away the evidence of failure and make even the cursed armor gleam with pride. We see what Space Marines do not want seen, record what they cannot speak of, and honor them by making their equipment beautiful despite the terrors it has witnessed. We are the keepers of sacred armor and terrible truths, and we serve until death claims us, because there is no work more holy than ensuring heroes are remembered as they truly were, flawed, struggling, and transcendent in their refusal to surrender to the darkness within. My name is Thrask Voral, Master Artificer of the Blood Angels Reclusium, and I have cleaned the armor of gods for 60 years, and I will continue until I can clean no more.